The space station's sensors first detected it at dawn, or what passed for dawn in orbit around Earth. A massive silhouette floated silently against the black canvas of space, a shape that no one had seen in over 100 years. It was human, unmistakably human in design, yet ancient. Its hull was scarred and pitted, and decades of cosmic dust clung stubbornly to every surface. The announcement spread quickly through the station and then across the Earth communications network. The old ship had returned. No one could say why, no one knew how, but it was coming home. Commander Jalen Ortiz stared at the live feed in disbelief. He had studied old space logs, read every archived message about the ship's last journey. And yet, seeing it drift into orbit was something entirely different. It was the Vigilant, a vessel lost to history, vanished on an exploratory mission to the edge of the solar system. Every person on the station knew its story. 100 crew members, pioneers of a new era, never returning, their fate a mystery locked in the cold void of space. And now, here it was, as if pulled from time itself, floating like a ghost in the station's sensors. "Sir," a voice broke his thoughts. Lieutenant Caravance, young but steady, gestured to the display. "All systems are active. Hull integrity is oddly intact. There's no sign of damage that could have caused a catastrophic failure." Jalen leaned closer. "Active systems? After a century? Are you sure?" Kara nodded. "I've double-checked. Power levels are low but functional. Life support is running, though we aren't detecting any crew signatures." That silence was the heaviest thing in the room. A ship so large, with 100 people aboard, and no life signals at all. Jalen rubbed his temples. This was beyond unusual. It was impossible, and yet the instruments told the same story repeatedly. The station's command council quickly authorized a boarding mission. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel were chosen carefully. They would need the sharpest minds, the steadiest hands. Jalen oversaw the preparation personally. Every detail was checked: suits, tools, sensors, weapons. Not that they expected combat, but no one could predict what lay inside the Vigilant. When the boarding party docked, the silence of the old ship struck them immediately. The airlock cycled open with a hiss that seemed louder than it should have been. They stepped into the long corridor, lights flickering intermittently as if uncertain about welcoming guests. The walls bore the dull sheen of aged metal, streaked with faint discolorations from decades of exposure. "Field wrong," muttered Dr. Elias Thorne, the senior scientist. He had studied the ship's design extensively, yet nothing about walking its hallways matched the diagrams or simulations. Kara adjusted her helmet lights, sweeping the corridor. "It's quiet. Too quiet." They moved carefully, their boots echoing in the empty corridors. Every room they opened was eerily ordinary. Crew quarters with personal effects left in place, mess halls with tables neatly arranged, the bridge with screens frozen mid-readout. It was as though the crew had simply vanished, leaving life paused in a 100-year snapshot. Dr. Thorne approached a console, brushing dust from the screen. "Logs are still running. Communications, internal messaging. Everything stopped abruptly, exactly 100 years ago." His voice was barely audible over the soft hum of the ship's minimal power. "It's like they just walked out." Jalen frowned. "Walked out? You mean—" "I mean," Thorne said slowly, "that whatever happened, it happened fast. And there's no evidence of a struggle, no fire, no hull breach, no signs of sabotage. It's as if the ship itself swallowed them." They proceeded to the ship's lower decks. The corridors seemed longer here, twisted almost imperceptibly, with angles that felt slightly off. The further they went, the more the silence weighed upon them. A flicker of movement caught Kara's eye, but when she turned, nothing was there. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "See what?" Jalen asked, already tense. Shadows played tricks in the weak light, and nerves frayed easily in situations like this. I thought, never mind. Kara shook her head. She wasn't one to panic, but there was something in the air, something intangible that set her on edge. As they approached the sealed chamber, the air seemed warmer. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make them pause. The hatch was corroded, metal eaten away by time and space, yet somehow it radiated an odd heat, like a heartbeat in steel. Dr. Thorne inspected it closely. The logs mention this chamber. They never opened it. Systems here, well, they're beyond my understanding. It's almost as if it's alive. Alive? Jalen echoed. The word sounded absurd even to him, but the feeling was undeniable. The ship seemed to watch them, to anticipate their movements. He signaled for the team to prepare tools to force the hatch open. The metal groaned under pressure, resisting until finally, with a final metallic shriek, it swung inward. Inside, the chamber was dimly lit by the ship's faint energy source. At the center, the engine core pulsed softly, a strange bluish glow emanating from coils of unfamiliar material. The sight was mesmerizing. Kara stepped forward, her hand hovering near the core. It's beautiful. Dr. Thorne frowned. Not beautiful. Dangerous. Look at these markings. The walls were etched with strange symbols, curves and angles that made no sense in any human language. The crew, they tried to communicate with something, or perhaps they were studying something we can't comprehend. As the team observed the core, subtle movements flickered at the edges of their vision. Shadows that didn't belong, whispers that weren't carried by any air. The feeling of being watched became overwhelming. "Stay close," Jalen ordered. "Do not separate." Hours passed as they examined the room. The logs replayed faint holographic recordings, showing crew members going about their duties, their faces calm, focused. Until suddenly, panic erupted. Screams, commands shouted over one another, and then nothing. The recording looped, frozen in the moment of chaos, but no explanation followed. Kara shivered. It's like the ship is showing us their last moments. But why? Why let us see this? Dr. Thorne shook his head. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe whatever they encountered, whatever took them, is still here. The first strange incident occurred as they prepared to leave the chamber. Lieutenant Storym, the communications specialist, vanished. One moment he was standing near the hatch, the next nothing. No sound, no trace. His suit logs stopped mid-record. "Kara, he's gone!" Jalen shouted, panic tightening his voice. The team searched frantically, scanning every corner, corridor, and ventilation shaft. But Storym was gone. The air was still. The shadows remained, flickering in impossible angles. Dr. Thorne's voice trembled slightly. I think the ship itself wants us to understand. Or maybe it's testing us. The crew, they didn't survive the test." Jalen's mind raced. 100 years of mystery now alive before him, and the chilling realization they were not alone, not in the way they had expected. Something, unknown, intelligent, and patient, moved through the ship, watching, waiting. As they regrouped near the engine core, the lights dimmed further. The hum of the ship became a low vibration like a pulse. Shadows coalesced, stretching and twisting in shapes that made no sense. Whispers brushed past their ears, soft but unmistakable. Names. Their names. Jalen swallowed hard. "We need to leave, now." Dr. Thorne hesitated. "If we leave without understanding the core, the ship, whatever it is, might follow us. Or worse. We need to study it. We need to know." Kara's voice was firm. "And if it kills us like it did them, we don't know what's out there." The tension crackled between them, but the decision was made for them. The ship seemed to shift subtly, guiding them deeper. Corridors elongated, Angles bent, and even the air pressure felt manipulated. It was as if the Vigilant were alive, responding to their fear, to their curiosity. At the end of the deck, they reached a narrow passage leading further down. A faint light glowed beyond, almost inviting. The heat from the sealed chamber lingered, and the hum of the engine core pulsed like a heartbeat. Jalen looked at his team. "We go in, together. No one separates." They stepped into the passage, uncertainty gnawing at every step. Behind them, the sealed chamber seemed to watch, waiting. The crew's last moments replayed faintly in the walls, a silent echo of terror and discovery. And deep within the ship, the engine core pulsed, sending vibrations through the metal bones of the Vigilant. Whatever had claimed the crew a century ago had not left. It waited, patient and silent, for the next visitors to uncover its secret. The old ship had returned, but its crew did not. And now, humanity was about to learn why. The passage narrowed as the team advanced deeper into the heart of the Vigilant. Each step echoed with an unnatural resonance, as though the metal itself was listening. The pulsing from the engine core behind them seemed to grow stronger, beating like a hidden drum in the ship's chest. Shadows clung to the walls and corners, flickering in ways that defied logic, yet none of the explorers dared to look away. "Do you feel that?" Kara whispered. Her voice was tight with tension. "The air! It's heavier down here." Dr. Elias Thorne adjusted his helmet lights, scanning the walls. The symbols etched along the metal continued here, curling and spiraling in forms that made his head ache. "These markings, they're not just decoration, they're patterns, codes. I think the crew was trying to communicate or control something." Jalen kept his eyes on the dim corridor ahead. "Control what?" Thorne shook his head slowly. "Something beyond understanding. Something not human." They entered a wide chamber at the end of the passage. The room was dominated by a massive energy lattice stretching from floor to ceiling, emitting a faint blue glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Holographic interfaces hovered around it, displaying data streams that shifted and flowed like liquid. The explorers felt an immediate sense of awe, tempered by the gnawing fear of the unknown. "This is incredible," Kara murmured, stepping closer. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. The ship wasn't just traveling through space. It was experimenting with something else. Other dimensions." "Maybe," Thorne said, his voice barely audible. He approached the energy lattice, careful not to touch it. The logs mention interdimensional research. The crew, they tried to reach beyond our universe, to study something outside our reality. Jalen frowned. "And it killed them?" Thorne didn't answer immediately. He traced one of the etched symbols along the lattice. "Not directly. They didn't die from the experiments themselves. Whatever they encountered, whatever they opened, changed them. It drove them to despair, to madness, and then to death." A cold shiver ran down Kara's spine. "So we're next?" Before anyone could respond, the ship trembled. Not like an earthquake, but subtly, like a deep exhale from something living. Lights flickered, and shadows danced across the walls, elongating and twisting. Whispers, soft but distinct, filled the chamber. They spoke in a language the explorers didn't understand, yet the tone carried fear, warning, and invitation. Jalen drew his sidearm, though he knew it would be useless against whatever force was here. "Stay together. No one goes near the lattice alone." The team began analyzing the holographic interfaces, trying to understand the energy patterns. Data streams flowed in impossible directions, forming shapes that suggested intelligence. Patterns emerged in the chaos, and Thorne's excitement grew despite the danger. The ship is alive somehow, not biological, not mechanical, something in between. And it's aware of us. I can feel it. Kara's voice shook. Feel it? I feel like it's reading my thoughts, my fears, my memories. It's inside my head. Suddenly, a vision flashed across the chamber. Kara saw the crew of the Vigilant moving about in daily routines. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, panic erupted. Crew members screamed and ran, shadows consuming them. Kara stumbled backward, gasping. "Are you okay?" Jalen demanded. "I saw them," she whispered. "The crew, their last moments, and something was hunting them." Thorn studied the energy lattice carefully. The logs confirm it. They called it the entity beyond. They encountered a force outside their reality. It's intelligent, aware, and it feeds on fear, despair, uncertainty. And now it knows we're here. The lights dimmed further, plunging the room into a strange twilight. The hum of the engine core intensified, vibrating through their bodies. Whispers grew louder, forming words they could almost understand, yet never fully. Shadows detached from walls, coalescing into vague, terrifying forms at the edge of vision. "We need to move," Jalen said, urgency tightening his voice. "Back to the hatch. We can't stay here." But the ship had other plans. Corridors warped subtly, shifting like liquid. The path they had taken to this chamber no longer aligned with their memory. It was as if the Vigilant was alive, guiding them deeper into its heart, away from escape. Dr. Thorne's eyes widened in fascination. "It's testing us. It's curious, like the crew before us. But we're smarter than them. We can control our fear." "You think it matters?" Kara snapped. "The crew died, and you think we're safe?" Thorne hesitated, but his scientific mind would not be silenced. "We have to try. We can't leave without understanding it. Knowledge is our weapon." As they moved forward, the chamber's walls pulsed with light, symbols twisted and rearranged themselves in patterns too complex for human eyes. Then, one by one, the team began hearing whispers directed at them individually, speaking of regrets, fears, doubts. The ship, the entity, was probing their minds, learning them, testing them. Jalen's hands shook slightly. "Hold it together. Focus on the mission. We observe, we record, we leave." Hours passed, though time felt meaningless. Kara and Thorne pored over holographic logs, mapping symbols to energy patterns. Jalen maintained constant vigilance, watching shadows and listening for movement. Every corridor they entered seemed alive, responding to their thoughts. One wrong thought, and the entity could twist it against them. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the chamber. Not solid, not human, but vaguely humanoid. It shimmered and shifted, as if made of light and shadow. The explorers froze, recognizing instinctively that this was not a hallucination, but something real, something aware. Dr. Thorne whispered, awestruck. "The entity?" The figure advanced, but not aggressively. Its movement was curious, studying them, observing. It paused, and Kara felt a wave of emotion wash over her, fear, sorrow, despair, but also a strange sense of understanding. "You can communicate with it," Jalen said, almost in disbelief. Thorne nodded. "We have to try, carefully." Using the knowledge gleaned from the crew's logs, Thorne attempted a rudimentary pattern of symbols projected through the holographic interface. The entity hesitated, watching. Then, slowly, it reacted, its form shifting in response to the symbols. It was as if it were learning, adapting, but not hostile yet. "This is incredible," Kara breathed. "It's not attacking us, not yet. It's studying us." Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and the chamber trembled. Shadows lunged forward, dissolving into forms that clawed at their minds. Panic gripped the team, but Jalen shouted over it, forcing them to focus. "Don't let it control you. Focus on the patterns. Keep the sequence going." Hours became a blur. The explorers worked tirelessly, maintaining the interface, decoding symbols, and projecting energy patterns. Slowly, the entity's form stabilized, less threatening, more observant. Dr. Thorne realized the truth. The ship itself had been a vessel of discovery, a tool designed by humans to reach beyond the known universe. But in their arrogance, the original crew had awakened something beyond comprehension. That entity, that force, existed outside human understanding, and it had consumed them, mentally and spiritually, leaving only their bodies behind. Kara finally spoke, voice trembling but determined. So the crew, they didn't survive because they couldn't control their fear. But maybe we can. We're smarter. We're stronger. Jalen nodded. We can't let fear control us. Not here. Not now. With renewed determination, the team pressed on, deeper into the chamber, studying the core and its energy flows. They realized that the entity's influence was tied to the core itself. By learning its patterns, they might be able to contain it, or at least understand it well enough to survive. As Part 2 drew to a close, the team had not yet solved the mystery, but they had survived their first direct encounter with the unknown. The ship hummed around them, alive and aware, while the entity watched, curious and patient. One thing was clear. The Vigilant's secrets were far from fully revealed, and the path ahead was fraught with danger, but humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and courage were its only hope against the force that had destroyed 100 lives a century ago. The team prepared to move further into the ship, following the clues left by the original crew, aware that every step deeper was a test. The old ship, with its long-dead crew and living engine, had begun to reveal its secrets, but only to those strong enough to face the unknown. And in the shadows of the Vigilant, the entity waited, learning, observing, and biding its time. The deeper the team went into the Vigilant, the more the ship seemed to change around them. Corridors that had appeared straight now twisted at impossible angles. Doors led into rooms that had no maps in the ship's logs. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching and shrinking as though they had minds of their own. Every step forward felt like stepping into someone else's dream, one shaped by fear and unknown forces. Jalen felt the tension in the team. Kara was on edge, her hands trembling slightly as she held her helmet light. Dr. Thorne, obsessed with the engine core, had been muttering to himself for hours, scanning symbols and data streams with an intensity that bordered on madness. Even Jalen himself, usually calm and collected, felt the strange pull of the ship, the weight of unseen eyes watching their every move. "This isn't just a ship anymore," Kara whispered as they passed a long, narrow corridor. "It's alive, and it's testing us." Thorne looked up, his eyes wide. "Alive, yes, but not biological, not in the way we understand life. The energy here, the patterns, it's something else, something beyond human comprehension. The crew never understood it, and they paid the price." Jalen tightened his jaw. "Then we make sure we do. No mistakes, no panic. We focus on what we know and what we can control." But control was slipping from them. As they moved forward, corridors seemed to stretch, distances bending unnaturally. At times, they swore they saw figures moving just beyond their vision, shadows that weren't cast by any light. Whispers crawled through their minds, sometimes faint, sometimes clear. They were voices from the past, echoes of the crew, or perhaps fabrications of the entity that Thorne had described. Lieutenant Soren, the communications specialist who had vanished in Part 1, was gone long enough that the team had begun to accept his loss. Yet now, his voice returned, faint and distorted, calling from nowhere and everywhere at once. Kara jumped. "Soren?" she called, her voice shaking. "Where are you?" There was no answer. Only a low hum from the ship and the whispered echoes of 100 years of fear. They reached a chamber larger than any they had seen, dominated by a massive, pulsating energy field that seemed to ripple in 3 dimensions at once. This was the heart of the Vigilant, where the engine core interacted with the unknown entity. Holographic interfaces flickered above it, streams of incomprehensible data floating like liquid fire. Thorn moved closer, fascinated. "This is where it happened," he said. "This is where the crew made contact, and this is where it changed them." Kara shivered. "Changed them? They died, Elias. We've seen the logs. They all died. Not just physically," Thorn said, his voice low. "Mentally, spiritually. The entity feeds on fear, despair, curiosity. It twists the mind, forces you to confront your deepest insecurities. It doesn't kill instantly. It destroys everything that makes you human first." Jalen frowned. "Then how do we survive?" Thorn hesitated. "We have to face it. We cannot let it manipulate us. We have to understand it, control our fear, and learn from what the crew failed to grasp." Before they could act, the energy field pulsed sharply, and the chamber shifted around them. Floors seemed to rise, walls bent at impossible angles, and shadows coalesced into shapes that moved independently. The whispers grew louder, now speaking directly to them, naming their doubts, their failures, their deepest fears. Kara gritted her teeth. "It's in my head. I can feel it. It knows what I fear. My past, my mistakes." Jalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "Focus on what's real. Focus on the team. Focus on each other. That's what keeps you human." The entity revealed itself partially, a shifting mass of shadow and light, vaguely humanoid but incomprehensible. It moved with intelligence, observing them, testing them. Kara's heart raced. She wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Thorn approached the energy lattice, projecting symbols he had decoded from the logs. "We have to communicate with it. We can't fight it. But maybe we can reason with it, or at least coexist long enough to learn what it is." The entity paused, responding subtly to the symbols. Its form pulsed in rhythm with the lattice, and for a moment, the shadows around them calmed. It was observing, learning, but not attacking. Yet. Hours passed in tense silence as the team worked to maintain a pattern of symbols projected through the holographic interfaces. The entity responded, sometimes by shifting its form, sometimes by creating illusions that challenged their sanity. In one fleeting moment, Kara saw the crew of the Vigilant standing before her, their faces twisted in panic. She blinked, and they were gone. Dr. Thorn whispered in awe. "It's teaching us, or testing us. This is how the crew failed. They couldn't maintain control of their fear, but we might." Jalen nodded. "We have to. Focus, team. Every step matters." As they pressed further, the entity began manipulating the ship itself. Corridors twisted more violently, rooms disappeared and reappeared, and the very air seemed to resist their movement. Each time they thought they were moving forward, they ended up back where they started, trapped in a looping maze. "It's learning from us," Kara said. "Every fear we feel, every doubt we have, it's feeding on it, shaping the ship around us." Thorn's mind raced. "If we can anticipate its reactions, we can stay ahead. We have to think like it. Not with fear, but with logic, patterns, and persistence." Suddenly, a wall of shadows surged forward, and one member of the team, a young engineer named Lyra, screamed as visions assaulted her mind. She fell to the floor, convulsing. Jalen grabbed her, holding her steady. "Kara, help me! Focus her!" he shouted. Kara knelt beside Lyra, speaking calmly. "It's not real. The entity wants you to believe it's real. Fight it. Focus on your breathing, on your heartbeat, on us. We're here. We're real." Slowly, Lyra regained control, her eyes wide with terror. It showed me everything, my failures, my fears. I almost lost myself." "That's exactly what it wants," Thorn said grimly. And every second we spend here, we risk the same fate. But we have to endure. We have to study it. We have to understand how the core interacts with the entity. They pressed forward to a smaller chamber adjacent to the energy lattice. It was filled with logs, recordings, and physical data storage from the original crew. The walls were lined with screens, some flickering, some fully operational. They displayed the final moments of the crew, the chaos and the panic that had consumed them. "We're seeing the past," Kara said, her voice trembling. "The crew's last moments. But it's not too late for us." Thorn examined a console, projecting more symbols into the lattice. "If we can recreate their sequence correctly, without letting fear control us, we might be able to stabilize the entity long enough to study it. But if we fail, we're finished." Jalen took a deep breath. "Then we focus, one step at a time, together." As they worked, the entity became more active, testing them. Shadows surged, lights flickered violently, and whispers screamed in their minds. Every attempt to manipulate the holographic sequence was met with resistance, as if the entity were aware of their strategy, adapting in real time. Kara almost panicked when she saw a vision of her family, calling for her from a distant place she could not reach. But Jalen's hand on her shoulder grounded her. "It's not real. Fight it. Focus on the mission." Hours became an indistinct blur of tension, concentration, and mental strain. The team learned to anticipate the entity's reactions, adjusting the patterns in the holographic interface with careful precision. Slowly, the chaos began to stabilize. The shadows receded, the whispers softened, and the energy lattice pulsed steadily, no longer lashing out at them. Thorn allowed himself a small, shaky smile. "We're making progress. We're learning from the crew's mistakes." Kara wiped sweat from her brow. "It's still dangerous. I can feel it watching, waiting. One wrong move and it could destroy us all." Jalen nodded. "Then we keep moving. We survive, and we find out what the crew never did. We face it, not with fear, but with courage. That's what makes us human. That's what they lacked." As they prepared to move deeper into the core chamber, the team realized something profound. The entity wasn't just a force of destruction, it was a test, a challenge that measured their humanity, their resilience, and their courage. It had claimed the crew of the Vigilant because they failed the test. But the explorers were different. They were trained, disciplined, and determined. They had each other. They had knowledge. And most importantly, they had the courage to confront the unknown without succumbing to fear. The Vigilant, silent, and ancient, pulsed around them, alive and aware. And within its heart, the entity observed, calculating, patient, and waiting for the next move. Humanity's confrontation with the unknown was far from over, but Part 3 ended with a spark of hope. The team had survived the first full assault of the entity, and their ingenuity and courage had begun to push back against the forces that had destroyed 100 lives a century ago. The journey was far from finished. The core still held secrets, the entity still waited, and the corridors of the Vigilant still twisted in impossible ways. But the explorers had learned a crucial truth. Fear could be resisted, courage could prevail, and humanity, resilient and determined, might yet survive where others had perished. And in the shadows, the Vigilant seemed to pulse with anticipation. As if acknowledging that this new crew might be worthy of the knowledge it had guarded for 100 years. The chamber's energy lattice pulsed steadily, its rhythm like a heartbeat that seemed to echo through every metal corridor of the Vigilant. Shadows lingered at the edges of the explorers' vision, and whispers echoed softly through their helmets. The entity had observed, tested, and now seemed to wait. It had learned from their fear, but it had also measured their courage. Jalen looked at his team, reading the tension and determination on their faces. Kara's eyes were wide but steady, Dr. Thorne's mind still consumed with patterns and symbols, and Lyra's hands trembled slightly from the last encounter. "This is it," Jalen said quietly. "We either succeed or we don't leave this ship. We focus. We act together." Thorn moved closer to the lattice, projecting sequences of symbols based on what they had learned from the crew's logs. Each pattern pulsed through the energy field, interacting with the entity in ways that were visible now, subtle shifts in its form, almost as if it were reacting, adjusting, and communicating. "This is the plan," Thorn explained. "We have to reverse the energy flow of the core. If we succeed, it will trap the entity in a stasis loop. We'll destroy the ship's interaction with it, and the entity won't be able to reach us, or the universe outside. But one mistake." He swallowed. "One mistake, and it could consume us all." Kara swallowed her fear and nodded. "Then we don't make mistakes, step by step. Focus on the patterns, on the core. We control what we can." Jalen took a deep breath. "Everyone ready? Let's begin." They moved in unison, each team member performing a critical task. Thorn adjusted the holographic projections, Kara monitored the energy lattice, Lyra controlled the ship's interface, and Jalen coordinated movements to maintain stability. The entity stirred, its form expanding and contracting as it sensed their actions. It sent out waves of energy that twisted reality within the chamber, walls bending, floors rippling, and shadows reaching toward them. But the explorers held firm. Time seemed to stretch. Hours, minutes, seconds. They had no way of knowing. The lattice pulsed faster, and the entity reacted violently, sending visions into their minds. Kara saw her parents, calling to her from a distant home she had left behind. Lyra saw the moment she had failed her first mission, the fear of judgment washing over her. Thorn was confronted with his own obsession, the thought that his curiosity had led them all to this danger. Jalen shouted above the cacophony, "It's not real! Focus on what's real! We are alive! We are here!" Slowly, one by one, the team pushed through the illusions. They recited the sequence of symbols aloud, their voices steady and unbroken, guiding the energy flow of the lattice. The entities surged, attempting to disrupt them, but they matched every pulse, every wave, with calm, precise action. Their unity, their courage, became a shield against the force that had destroyed the Vigilance crew a century ago. Thorn's eyes widened as he adjusted the final sequence. "We're close! Just a few more adjustments!" The lattice shuddered violently, and the chamber trembled. Shadows writhed and twisted into monstrous forms, the whispers growing deafening, but the explorers did not falter. With a final synchronization of symbols and energy projection, the lattice pulsed one last time. A brilliant wave of blue light expanded, filling the chamber and sweeping through the ship. The entity screamed, or at least the sound in their minds resembled a scream. It surged violently, thrashing against the stasis loop that had been imposed upon it. The shadows writhed, the whispers became incoherent, and then, gradually, the force began to contract, retreat, and finally freeze in place. Its form became fixed, stable, trapped in a temporal stasis. The chamber was silent. The lattice's pulse slowed and then ceased, leaving only the faint hum of residual energy. The shadows vanished, the whispers faded. The ship was still, quiet, almost peaceful. Kara exhaled sharply. "It's done." Jalen looked at the team, faces pale but triumphant. "We did it! We survived!" Thorn approached the energy lattice cautiously. "The entity is contained. The core is stable, but we have to leave. The ship, after 100 years, it's unstable. Any longer here could be dangerous." The team navigated back through the twisting corridors, still cautious, but the Vigilant seemed less hostile now. The shadows no longer moved independently, and the corridors aligned as expected. It was as if the ship, recognizing their success, allowed them safe passage. They returned to the airlock that connected to the station. Jalen checked the controls carefully. All clear. Let's get out of here. As the airlock cycled open, the team paused, looking back at the Vigilant. It floated silently, ancient and immense. A ghostly monument to human ambition and curiosity. The engine core, which had pulsed with unimaginable energy, now glowed softly, stable, and quiet. "Think the crew," Kara began, but Jalen shook his head. "They're gone. We can't change that. But we've learned from them. Their mistakes taught us what it means to survive, to confront the unknown, and to use courage and intelligence to prevail." Thorne nodded, still studying the readings from the ship. "We've seen the limits of human understanding, and we've pushed past them. That's what matters. Humanity. We endure. We adapt. We overcome." The docking bay doors opened, and the explorers stepped back onto the station. The cold vacuum of space beyond the windows reminded them of the vastness and mystery of the universe. The Vigilant floated silently, a reminder of the courage and hubris of the past and the enduring spirit of humanity. Over the following hours, they debriefed the station council. They recounted everything: the ship, the entity, the experience of the crew, and their own confrontation with the unknown. There was awe, disbelief, and respect in equal measure. The council recognized that the Vigilant had returned not just as a ghost, but as a lesson. Humanity had survived where others had perished. Jalen spoke finally, his voice steady. "The old ship returned after a century, but it didn't come to destroy us. It came to remind us of what we are capable of. Curiosity, courage, intelligence. These are our strengths. Fear cannot control us unless we allow it. Humanity will continue to explore, to learn, to endure." Kara, exhausted but resolute, added, "And the Vigilant will remain a warning and a guide. We faced the unknown and survived. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us strong." The team watched as the Vigilant drifted silently into the depths of space, now stable but carrying the memory of its century-old crew. Somewhere within its hull, the entity remained contained, a force beyond understanding, yet powerless against human ingenuity and courage. Months later, scientists on Earth began to study the data recovered from the Vigilant. The energy lattice, the holographic logs, and the strange symbols became subjects of research. Humanity had touched the edge of the unknown and returned with knowledge that would change the course of exploration forever. And far from Earth, in the silent corridors of the Vigilant, the entity remained trapped, patient, and restrained. A reminder of forces beyond comprehension. But humanity had proven that intelligence, courage, and unity could overcome even the most alien challenges. The explorers became heroes, but more importantly, they became symbols of what it meant to confront the unknown, to be brave, to be curious, and to survive. The Vigilant had returned, but it had not claimed new victims. Humanity had risen, enduring where others had fallen, leaving the legacy of courage and perseverance for the next generations to follow. In the endless night of space, the old ship floated quietly, its secrets contained, its lessons learned, and humanity stronger for the encounter. And as explorers looked to the stars, they knew this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, mysterious, and filled with challenges beyond imagination. But humanity would meet them head-on, as it always had, with courage, intelligence, and the unshakable belief that no matter the odds, it could endure. The old ship had returned after a century, with no crew alive, but in facing the unknown, humanity had claimed victory.